The room that watches. Mara hadn't intended to find the house. She'd simply been driving. Aimless. Her apartment in the city still smelled like ash from the fire a week ago, nothing serious, just a kitchen mishap, but the smell had sunk into the walls, into her clothes, into her lungs. She couldn't breathe there anymore. So she drove. The road took her north, through hills and forests until the GPS flickered out. She should have turned back, but there was something about the pine-dark air that calmed her. As if something had reached into her chest and unwound the tension, thread by thread. She spotted the sign in the overgrowth, "For rent, inquire within." No phone number, no real estate logo. Just those words, carved into rotting wood, leaning sideways. The house sat beyond a gravel path, half swallowed by trees. It looked like no one had lived there in years, weathered boards, moss-choked roof tiles, a porch sagging with age. But the windows were clean. And the door swung open when she stepped onto the porch, though she hadn't touched it. Inside was still. The smell wasn't mildew or dust, it was warm, faintly sweet, like old paper and dried roses. She called out once, twice. No answer. But on the hallway table lay a single sheet of paper. Mara Ellings. Welcome. Stay as long as you need. Her breath caught. She hadn't given her name. Hadn't spoken to anyone. She backed toward the door, but it clicked shut behind her. She turned the knob. Unlocked. But she didn't leave. Instead, she walked through the house. Sunlight filtered through high windows, painting long shadows on the hardwood floors. The living room was strangely modern, furnished simply, a couch, a lamp, a fireplace clean of ash. No pictures. No clutter. Just enough to suggest comfort. Then she found the staircase. Narrow, steep, climbing into the upper floor like a throat. She hesitated. Halfway up, a floorboard groaned above. A single footstep. Nothing more. She stopped, heart racing. Hello? Silence. Then a whisper of wind through a cracked window. Mara shook her head. Just old wood. Just nerves. She took the last steps up. There were 3 doors. 2 led to empty bedrooms. The third was locked. Something about it made her stomach churn. She tried the handle. It didn't budge. As she turned away, she thought she heard something from behind it. A slow, deliberate breath. By the next morning, Mara had almost convinced herself she imagined it. The breath, the sound, the odd letter, her brain filling in gaps, assigning meaning to nothing. Maybe the note had been from a caretaker. Maybe they'd checked her license plate, made a weird guess. Maybe the door had settled shut. She made coffee in the kitchen, surprised to find everything stocked and functioning. The fridge hummed softly. The drawers held clean utensils. Cups and plates sat stacked neatly in cupboards. There were even bags of ground coffee in the pantry. Her preferred blend, dark roast. It should have unnerved her more. But it didn't. Later, she stood on the back porch. The woods stretched behind the house like an ancient wall. She thought she saw movement between the trees, something pale flitting between the trunks, but when she squinted, there was only stillness. At noon, she called her sister. No answer. The call didn't even ring, just went dead. Same with her email. Her laptop connected to Wi-Fi, but nothing loaded. She tried news sites, a weather app, even GPS. Nothing but buffering. I'll give it a day, she murmured aloud, trying to sound braver than she felt. She explored more thoroughly in the afternoon. There was a library downstairs, floor-to-ceiling shelves, most of the books without titles. The spines were black, unmarked, their texture like dry skin. She opened one. The pages were blank. All of them were. She dropped the book back into place and left the room. That night, she slept on the couch again. She didn't like the bedrooms upstairs, not with that locked door. Not with how the hallway creaked in the dark, slow and groaning, like someone was walking back and forth all night long. Sometime around 3 in the morning, she woke to find the fire lit in the hearth. She hadn't started it. The house was warm, but the fire cracked and popped, shadows stretching long across the walls. She sat up, blanket clutched tight. From the hallway came a faint creak. A door hinge? Then silence. "Hello," she called again, her voice quieter this time. Afraid of being heard. No answer. But the fire flared, just once, high and sudden, then settled. When she lay back down, she kept her eyes open until dawn. The next day, Mara approached the locked door again. Sunlight poured through the hallway window, but it didn't reach the wood. That section of wall was always in shadow. She knelt, pressing her ear against it. Nothing. Still, something in her felt watched. Like standing in a room with someone behind you, just out of sight. A heat at the back of her neck. A stillness that felt like held breath. This time, she noticed the scratches. Tiny marks near the base of the doorframe. Not claw marks exactly, more like fingernails. Someone had scraped, lightly, repeatedly, as if trying to signal rather than escape. Her phone was still useless. It had a charge, but it no longer recognized any network. She couldn't call, text, or search. Everything digital was swallowed up in that buffering void. That evening, she tried sleeping upstairs. She brought the heaviest blanket she could find and settled into the bedroom farthest from the locked door. It was almost midnight when she heard it. Click. A lock, turning. Then, the slow sound of the door creaking open. She sat up straight. Her lamp flickered, casting the room in quick, chaotic shadows. She reached for her phone. It was hot, too hot to touch, the screen blank. Footsteps padded down the hall. Soft. Bare. They stopped outside her door. Mara. A voice. Male. Ragged. She held her breath. Her hand found the lamp's switch. She turned it off. Darkness. The doorknob turned slightly. Not enough to open. Just a testing twist. Mara, it whispered again. Then footsteps, retreating slowly. She didn't sleep. At dawn, the hallway was empty. The third door was closed. But no longer locked. Mara didn't touch the door that morning. Not yet. She stood a few feet from it, heart thumping, trying to decide what kind of person she was. Brave? Curious? Cautious? The kind who fled, or the kind who opened doors that should stay shut? Eventually, she turned away, went downstairs, made coffee with shaking hands. But every creak in the house, every flicker of shadow near the windows pulled her attention back upstairs. By late afternoon, she gave in. She climbed the steps slowly, one hand trailing along the wall for balance. At the top, she stood before the door again. It looked no different than before. Still dark. Still sunless. Mara reached out and turned the knob. It gave way. The door swung open without a sound. Inside, the air was cold, unnaturally so, as though the room had been sealed for centuries. No dust, though. No cobwebs. The floorboards gleamed, waxed to an almost mirror-like sheen. The walls were covered in wallpaper so dark it looked black until she stepped closer, then she saw faint shapes in it. Human silhouettes. Dozens of them. Faint impressions, like shadows scorched into the fabric. There was no bed. No furniture. Just a single chair in the center of the room, facing the window. She approached it, cautiously. The window looked out over the woods. Except, it didn't. What lay beyond the glass wasn't the backyard she remembered. It was something else entirely. A forest, yes, but twisted, wrong. Trees with trunks like spines. A sky the color of ash. And something moving slowly between the trees, its form always just out of focus. The chair was warm when she touched it. She backed away, out of the room, and closed the door. She didn't lock it. She didn't need to. The sense of finality, of invitation answered, was already thick in the air. That night, she dreamed of the room. She stood inside it, but the chair was gone. Instead, she faced the window, and this time the thing in the woods turned its head toward her. It had no face. But she knew it was smiling. She woke to find herself standing at the foot of the bed. Her feet were bare and damp. Her hand rested on the doorknob. The third door was open again. And the chair was no longer empty. Mara stood motionless, heart pounding, staring into the open doorway. Morning light spilled across the hallway, but none reached inside the room. The chair sat in its usual place, facing the window. But now, someone sat in it. She could only see the back of their head. Short, dark hair. Pale neck. Perfectly still. Her breath caught in her throat. She backed a step away. Who? Who are you? Her voice came out in a whisper. No answer. The figure didn't move. I live here now, she tried again. This house, it was empty. Still nothing. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the chair began to turn. She didn't wait to see the face. She turned and fled down the stairs, nearly slipping as she rounded the corner into the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she reached for the counter, grounding herself. This is a dream, she told herself. A hallucination. Maybe carbon monoxide. Maybe stress. She tried opening the front door. It didn't budge. Not locked. Not jammed. It just refused to move, as if the entire world outside had forgotten how to open. Behind her, the boards above creaked. Whoever was in that chair, if it was a person, was moving now. She could hear the steady thump of their footsteps descending, deliberate and soft. She spun around, expecting to see them, but no one came. The steps continued, but they never reached her. Instead, the back door creaked open. Just a crack. She hadn't touched it. Mara stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. She pushed the door open with her fingertips. Outside, the woods had changed. The trees had moved closer, crowding in toward the house, their gnarled branches reaching like arms. The sky overhead was dull and overcast, and a heavy silence pressed down on everything. She stepped back. Closed the door. Locked it. Double-checked it. Then the power went out. Every light. Every hum. The fridge died. The digital clock on the stove blinked once, then faded. She was alone in the silence. But she wasn't. Footsteps echoed above again. And this time, they were not alone. A second pair joined them. Then a third. And she realized the house wasn't empty. It never had been. Mara stayed in the kitchen for hours. She didn't dare move, barely dared to breathe. She stared at the doorway, expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. But nothing came. Not in the morning. Not in the afternoon. Not as night fell. When she finally moved, her muscles ached from the tension. Her phone was still dead. The light switches did nothing. She searched the basement for a fuse box and found it tucked behind a rotting curtain, the panel scorched, wires melted like wax. Something had burned out completely. Something inside the walls. But the house was fine. No smell of smoke. No damage. It was as if the destruction had happened years ago, sealed away behind time. She returned to the main floor, and only then did she hear it. A faint tapping. Rhythmic. Measured. Coming from beneath the floor. She dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the boards. The tapping continued, steady as a heartbeat. Then a pause. And then 3 slow knocks, directly beneath her. Knock. 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 She scrambled away. But the sound didn't follow. It simply resumed tapping again, like someone hammering lightly, endlessly, in some forgotten crawlspace. Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat in the library, surrounded by the blank books. She opened one, then another, desperately scanning the pages. Nothing. Nothing. Then, one page. Handwritten, near the center of a thick, black volume. "We see you." She slammed the book shut. From above, the footsteps started again. And then, the voice. "Mara." She froze. Not because she was afraid, it was worse than that. Because this time, it wasn't a whisper. It wasn't ragged or weak. It was calm. Measured. And it came from the stairwell. Someone was standing just out of sight. She didn't turn. She walked into the hallway. Her shadow stretched long in the flickering candlelight from the library. The stairs creaked. A foot came into view. Bare. Pale. The toes curled slightly as if adjusting to the temperature of the wood. Another step. She forced herself to speak. "What do you want?" The voice came again, soft but very clear. "You've already given it." Then silence. When she looked up, the stairs were empty. Mara didn't speak the rest of that night. Her voice felt trapped in her chest, lodged like a bone. The silence in the house was thick, stretching between the creaks and sighs of the floor like it had weight. She lit candles, anything to push back the darkness, but their flames flickered violently, as if disturbed by something unseen. She avoided the third room. She avoided the stairs. She stayed in the library, but the books had changed. Not all of them, just some. Here and there, where once there had been blank pages, now appeared fragments of text. Lines that seemed torn from other lives. "He watches through glass, but never from outside. Do not look at your reflection after midnight. The door is not a door, but a promise." She tried not to read anymore. Eventually, exhaustion overcame fear. She curled up on the library couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and something older. Her dreams were vivid, tactile. In one, she stood in front of a mirror. Not her own, but one warped at the edges, the glass mottled with age. Her reflection moved a second slower than her. And then it smiled. She woke gasping, clutching her chest. Her mouth was dry, her skin cold with sweat. Candle wax had dripped down the side of the table beside her, forming the outline of a hand on the wood. She didn't remember falling asleep. Mara stood up. She needed water, or air, or anything that wasn't this. She made her way to the bathroom at the end of the hall. The mirror above the sink was foggy, though no one had showered. She wiped it with her sleeve. Her reflection stared back. Pale. Tired. But something was off. The reflection blinked too slowly. Then smiled. She stumbled back, knocking a soap dish to the floor. It shattered like bone. The mirror was clear now. Ordinary. Her reflection mimicked her again. Perfectly. But Mara didn't move. Not for a long time. She just watched. And waited to see if it would do something else. The next morning, the air felt heavier. Mara woke not from sleep, but from a kind of paralysis. She couldn't say whether her eyes had ever closed. Time no longer moved the way it once had. Hours folded into each other, light shifting across the walls in a way that suggested the sun no longer obeyed. She made tea. The kettle worked, though she didn't remember filling it. She didn't remember turning on the stove. While she sat at the kitchen table, her eyes kept drifting to the hallway. At first, she thought it was just the angle of light, the way shadows stretched and pooled. But as she looked longer, she began to see a shape at the end of the hall. It never moved. It didn't seem human, not quite. It was too tall, too still. There were no details, only the outline of a person where no one should be. She left the table slowly and walked toward it. Each step she took made her feel less certain. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts clouded. But as she neared the figure, it simply wasn't there. She turned around. It was behind her now. The shape. Closer. She ran. Through the library, through the dining room, up the stairs. She didn't stop until she was in the far bedroom, the one with the old dresser and no mirror. There, she sat with her back to the wall and waited. Not for rescue. For understanding. The house was watching her. She had known it, in a vague way, since the first night. But now it was like pressure on her skin. As if the very walls were breathing in sync with her. As if something had taken her presence as permission. She heard movement in the hallway. Not footsteps, just presence. A shift in atmosphere. She didn't go to the door. She didn't speak. Instead, she whispered a question to the room itself. "What do you want from me?" No answer came. But she felt it. The sense that someone was listening. That someone had always been listening. And now, it was getting closer. Mara didn't sleep again. She paced the room, but the walls seemed to follow her, stretching and closing, like the house itself shifted in subtle ways with every turn she took. Even the wallpaper in the bedroom began to betray her trust. It had been simple, faded florals, cream and gray. But now she saw words in it. Not etched or stained. Formed by the pattern itself. "Let us in. We see you. You were always ours." She touched the paper. It was cold, and beneath it, the wall pulsed as if it had veins. In the afternoon, Mara went to the attic. She hadn't yet explored it, always assuming it would be too dark or cluttered. The narrow stairs groaned under her weight. The door at the top was unlocked. The attic was dustless. Clean. More than that, sterile. No cobwebs, no forgotten trunks. Just a space with a low ceiling and walls that felt too close. In the center stood a single wardrobe. Tall. Ornate. She opened it. Inside were coats. Dozens of them. Some modern, some old, decades old. One looked like it belonged in a black and white photo. A child's jacket hung beside it, so small her throat tightened. Mara backed away from the wardrobe. She turned to leave. But there was someone else in the attic. They didn't speak. They didn't move. But she saw the shape now, clear as anything, standing in the far corner. Not facing her. Just standing. Silent. When she blinked, it was gone. That night, the words on the wallpaper had changed. "Don't look outside." So she didn't. Not until morning. Not until she saw that the woods had drawn closer again, pressing against the house like a siege. And between the trees, the shadows were watching. Mara began to notice new things. Objects she hadn't seen before: an unfamiliar teacup on the counter, an old scarf draped over the stair rail, a single boot by the front door, began appearing as if they'd always been there. Each felt intimate, personal, like they had belonged to someone she once knew. She stopped removing them. It felt wrong. As though they were markers, left behind for her to follow. One afternoon, as the shadows lengthened across the floorboards, Mara found a photo album on the table in the library. She didn't remember bringing it there. It was thick, wrapped in cracked leather, and when she opened it, she braced herself for blank pages. They weren't blank. Each page held a black and white photo, faded but clear. A woman standing in front of the house. A man on the porch. A child, barely visible through an upstairs window. None of them were smiling. In the bottom corner of one page, she saw a name in looping cursive: Ellings. Her last name. She flipped back to the photo of the woman. It wasn't just any woman. It was her. Not similar. Not a great-grandmother or distant relative. It was Mara. Same eyes. Same hair. Same mole on her left cheek.
But the photo looked at least 50 years old. She snapped the book shut, but the image stayed behind her eyes. When she tried to throw it into the fireplace, the flames rejected it. The book remained cold to the touch. Later, in the mirror, she noticed the change. Just a flicker. She blinked. There, for an instant, her reflection aged. Deep lines in her face. Hair graying at the temples. Then it returned to normal. But the shift was real. The house was not simply haunted. It was remembering her. Or worse, it was helping her remember something she was meant to forget. The next morning, the front door was open. Mara stood at the threshold, staring out into a world she barely recognized. The woods had retreated, not far, but enough to reveal the gravel path again. The trees seemed thinner, as though they were watching her from a distance rather than crowding in. The light outside was gray, diffused, unnatural. She didn't step out. Something in her resisted. The house seemed to hum softly behind her, and she realized she wasn't afraid of what was out there. She was afraid of what would happen to the house if she left it. Still, she needed answers. She walked down the path, her breath tight, glancing back every few steps. The house stood silent, still watching. After a few minutes, she came to the edge of the road, where it should have connected to the rest of the world. But it didn't. The path ended in fog. Not mist, not haze, fog, dense and opaque, like a curtain pulled across the rest of reality. She reached out and her hand vanished into it. When she pulled back, her skin was damp and cold. She turned around. The house was closer than it had been. She hadn't walked back. But it was there, just a few feet behind her. As if the space between her and it had folded. She stepped through the front door again. It closed behind her. The air inside was warmer now, familiar. As if the house had drawn a breath of relief. On the wall by the stairs, there was a new picture. It showed Mara. Standing at the threshold. She hadn't posed for it. The photo had not been there an hour ago. Mara no longer questioned whether the house was alive. It knew her. It remembered her. And now, it was changing for her. The furniture shifted when she left a room. Objects reappeared in different places, carefully arranged. Her old notebooks, long lost in the fire back in the city, now sat stacked beside the bed. Her handwriting filled their pages, except she had no memory of writing any of it. She read one by candlelight. The pages were dated. Each entry was addressed to someone named Clara. Clara. He's closer now. The house opens when I sleep. I heard your voice today, through the wallpaper. Another page. Clara. The mirror doesn't show the hallway anymore. It shows the other room. The one beneath the floor. Mara shut the book and set it aside. That night, she opened a small panel door behind the pantry. She had never noticed it before. Inside was a narrow crawlspace, filled with a damp, earthy scent. She lit a candle and crawled in. The tunnel led down. Further than the foundation should go. She reached a stone chamber, circular and silent, its walls covered in carvings. Not just marks, names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. She found hers. Not once. Not twice. Dozens of times. Mara Ellings. 1912, 1947. 1983, 2006. Each date carved with care, as if someone had tracked her every return. As if she had always returned. She turned to leave, but the tunnel behind her was gone. In its place, a door. Familiar. The one from upstairs. It waited for her, half open. And behind it, a voice she recognized. Her own. Calling her name. Her voice echoed from behind the door. She hesitated only a moment before she stepped forward. The door creaked wider at her approach, as if the house itself anticipated her decision. Beyond was the room. The same one she had feared from the beginning. The one with the chair. This time, it was empty. But the window was no longer covered in night. Instead, it showed the forest burning, trees consumed in flame but standing motionless, as if they felt no pain. Figures walked among the fire, tall, thin, faceless, and they all turned to look at her. The air in the room buzzed with memory. Mara sat in the chair. As she did, her body stilled. Not paralyzed, calm. Whole. Every moment in the house coalesced, the footsteps, the whisper, the shifting mirrors, the entries in the journals. It had all happened before. And it would happen again. The room was not a prison. It was a witness. It had watched her live and die many times. It remembered everything she had forgotten. Every version of her that had come before, and every version yet to be. A voice, no longer hers, spoke from the walls. You see now. You've always seen. You stayed because you were meant to. You returned because you are part of us. The chair tilted back slightly. Her head turned toward the window on its own. The forest fire dimmed. The shapes faded. What remained was silence. Mara closed her eyes. And when she opened them again, she was back on the gravel path. A sign in the overgrowth read, "For rent, inquire within." She turned toward the house, heart calm, breath even. The door opened before she touched it. Inside, a sheet of paper lay on the table. Mara Ellings. Welcome. Stay as long as you need. She smiled. And stepped inside.